see you.
Welcome back to Ghost Pirate Entertainment. I'm your host, Kanan Becker, and today we talk about 10 more of the best found footage horror movies of all time. And with that, let's get to the list.
I don't want to be remembered as a douchebag. Somebody help me!
Deadstream is a 2022 found footage horror movie, written and directed by Joseph and Vanessa Winters. It also stars Joseph Winters and Melanie Stone. A disgraced internet personality tries to win back his followers by live streaming himself at an abandoned haunted house, but he accidentally unleashes a vengeful spirit.
This is the most haunted house in the United States.
Death Manor was built in 1880. Mildred lived here for 8 years in this house.
This is such a fun movie. I almost put it on part 1 of this, but if you're not aware, this is part 2. I already did talk about my 10 favorite found footage horror movies. So if you're seeing some that are not on this list, there's a good chance they're over on that list. But this movie is so fun. It's full of energy, it's quirky, it's charming, and it's interesting because when it starts out, it seems like you're just not gonna like this character at all. But over time, you kind of grow fond of him and you kind of like his quirky weirdness, and you start to understand who he really is and what is actually the truth in this situation. But I also enjoyed it because as someone who also makes a living on social media, some of the things he talks about and whatnot really ring true. I get where he's coming from. I don't personally choose to go the direction he does, and I'm definitely not trying to pull the wool over on my audience's eyes or anything like that, but some of the little nuances and things like that definitely resonated with me. I love the practical effects in this, and the movie really goes for it at a point, much more than I expected it to. And as funny as it still has its creepy, unnerving moments as well. So if you haven't seen this little gem, definitely get on it and check it out.
Hey, wait up! Wait up!
The House's October Bill is a 2014 found footage horror movie. Co-written, directed, and starring Bobby Rowe, it also stars Brandy Schaefer and Zach Andrews. The plot follows 5 friends who set out on a road trip to search for the best haunted houses, but find themselves targeted by a demented, mysterious group.
Tell me about yourself and what are we doing?
You want my name? My name is Zach. You've known me for 20 years, Mikey. I rented an RV. I want to find the most extreme haunted house in the world.
Of all the different found footage movies out there, this one to me is kind of one of the most underrated because it's really well put together and feels so authentic and real. Because the story behind it is when they initially started shooting this, the idea was to make a documentary about haunted houses and to travel around and just document different haunted houses. But then as things started coming together and they started getting some footage, they started thinking about what if this was a movie and what if things went sideways? And as they talked and as they started to plot things, it just kind of started happening. And so that just gives it a really authentic, believable quality. But everybody in it does a great job. They feel like real friends who find themselves in a really dark, messed up situation. But as a big fan of haunted houses, I also enjoy all the footage of the haunted houses, the different interviews they do with people that work at them, and just instead of it just simply going straight to the creepy, dark, twisted stuff, you also get this documentary side to it as well. But this movie gets dark and mysterious, very creepy and unnerving. This is a really well done found footage horror movie that deserves a lot more attention. Frankenstein's Army is a 2013 found footage horror movie. Directed by Richard Raforst, it stars Carell Roden, Joshua Sassy, and Luke Newberry. In the dying days of World War II, a battalion of Russian soldiers is lured into the secret lab of a deranged scientist and forced to face off against an army of horrific flesh and metal war machines.
What is that? Don't touch it. Don't touch it.
This movie is so badass. And I didn't know about this at all until earlier this year. And I had one of you guys, I wish I knew exactly who I'd give you credit, but one of you guys commented saying, hey, you should check out Frankenstein's Army. And I'm so glad I did, because this movie is just great. It feels fresh and unique, especially for a found footage movie. It just goes in different directions and shows the whole thing in kind of a different point of view and from a different angle than we usually see in a lot of especially American found footage movies. And it feels pretty authentic and believable, especially for something that's really low budget. And then when it starts to take a turn, it gets creepy at first and ominous, and then it just dives off the deep end and becomes super brutal, super gory and gross and disturbing, very twisted, and just a lot of fun. So if you're a fan of found footage horror movies like I am, this is one that I highly recommend.
Get out there, Mr. Midnight. And you knock him dead.
Late Night with the Devil is a 2023 supernatural found footage horror movie. Written, directed, and edited by Colin and Cameron Carnes. It stars David Dastmalchian, Laura Gordon, and Ian Bliss. A live television broadcast in 1977 goes horribly wrong, unleashing evil into the nation's living rooms.
It's becoming more unpredictable.
That's a good thing. That's why we still do live TV.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for a live television first as we attempt to commune with the devil.
So if you're confused by me saying 2023, that's the date it was made and first released at some of the different film festivals. But it technically didn't get its wide release and a theatrical release until this year. So in reality, we're talking about a new movie. But it's one of my favorite movies. I had such a great time with it. I love the way it looks, just that vintage 1970s flavor. And as someone who grew up in the 80s and 90s, watching especially reruns of 1970s late night shows and game shows and things like that, they were spot on with this. It looks so authentic. And I've become a really big fan of David Dastmalchian. His love for the horror genre, all the different things that he does and is involved in, really, he is one of a kind and a treasure that I hope most horror fans realize. But as many different parts and different things we've seen him in the last few years, he hasn't really had that leading man role until this. And he shows that he is more than qualified to do it, because he absolutely kills it in this movie. He is so good. But so is the rest of the cast. Everybody in this is great. They're all characters and unique and charming, and they feel real, but there's definitely also a little bit of tongue-in-cheek, a little bit of campy quality thrown in there for just good measure. Part of that is, that's just kind of the way TV was back in the day. Everybody was a little bit corny. Everything was just kind of turned up, and the corn factor was on high. And this is a unique one for the found footage genre because it doesn't exactly look found footage. But it is, technically it is found footage because this is footage from TV that never aired, and they came across it and are basically airing it now. And that's the definition of found footage. So found footage doesn't always have to be something shot on your phone or on some old camcorder or things like that. It can be a situation like this. But because of that, it looks great. I mean, the quality of it is there. I mean, yes, it has this aged 1970s quality about it, but still, it's not hard to see. It doesn't have this jittery thing going on or anything like that. But just in general, I think this movie's fantastic, and it makes me so happy that so much of the horror community seems to love this movie as well. I think this is a quintessential cult following kind of movie that will have a fan base for many years to come.
I don't see it.
He needs us.
Ghoul is a 2015 Czech mockumentary horror movie. Directed by Peter Jakul, it stars Jennifer Armour, Jeremy Isabella, and Paul S. Tracy. An American film crew goes to the Ukraine to investigate the stories of widespread cannibalism, only to summon the spirit of a notorious serial killer.
In 1932 and 1933, Ukraine suffered a terrible famine, which led many people to resort to cannibalism.
This is one of the most eerie, creepy, just really uncomfortable found footage mockumentary style movies out there. It's another one that I just kind of stumbled across a few years ago, and I still don't really hear anyone talk about it besides me. And it's surprising because if you're into found footage, mockumentary, you know, that kind of quality of a horror movie, This one's about as good as it gets. It goes in some wild directions, is very unique and one of a kind, especially because they interweave this real serial killer and things about this serial killer. It's interwoven into this fiction story. And I'm not going to get into who this serial killer is or explain much about him, because that's a lot of the fun of this movie, is seeing that unpacked and little by little picking the pieces and realizing what's going on here. But it's gritty and dirty, very uncomfortable. It just makes you feel like you need to take a shower. And it has some absolutely creepy nightmare fuel moments, especially towards the end of this movie. So my recommendation to you is find the biggest screen TV, whatever you have, turn off the lights, curl up on the couch, get all comfortable, and get creeped out.
With this information, then we're gonna prove to the world that Peeping Tom exists.
Butterfly Kisses is a 2018 found footage mockumentary horror movie. Directed by Eric Christopher Myers, it stars Rachel Arminger, Reed Delisle, and Matt Lake. The story's about a filmmaker who finds a box of videotapes depicting two students' disturbing film project featuring a local horror legend.
Absolutely no evidence to suggest that somebody is directing them.
We have the possibility that this whole thing is real. And we have the possibility this whole thing is a largely plausible hoax.
Here's another one that you just don't hear about. Not too long ago, Chris Stuckman talked about it in one of his videos, and so since then, it's gained a little bit of a following, a little bit of a buzz, but still not nearly as much as I feel like this deserves. Because it has this real mysterious, creepy quality throughout the entire movie, just this feeling of dread, because the idea of this urban legend and the way it all unfolds is very creepy. Because these videotapes and the urban legend itself, the whole story of it, is very, very unnerving. But then it kind of lulls you into this sense of security at times, because it very much feels like you're watching a documentary be made about this filmmaker who's trying to turn these tapes into a movie. He's trying to piece them together and make a real documentary kind of movie out of it. So it's so meta and you can easily get lost in it. It feels very authentic and it's easy to forget that you're watching a movie. But it's well paced, it's well shot, they know when to use grainy footage to creep you out, and then also a lot of it is very high quality because this guy's making a documentary. And so you're never stuck in this situation where you're really struggling to see things or stuff like that. But I think it's a real hidden gem, and if you've never seen this, I think it needs to be the next thing that you watch.
Go away!
I'm gonna show the world what happened here.
If you find this tape, just please get it out.
The Bay is a 2012 mockumentary horror movie. Directed by Barry Levinson, it stars Heather Donahue, Nancy Aluka, and Christopher Denham. Chaos breaks out in a small Maryland town after an ecological disaster.
I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. I know they shut down all the roads going into Claridge. Now I'm flying over the water here and, well, there's just dead fish everywhere.
Here's another one that feels so real. I just really love how they mix together different types of video footage to make this movie. Because at times you're watching news footage, then at other times you're watching someone walk around with a camera on differing levels, from a phone to an old camcorder, whatever. And so the quality differences, and as it keeps changing around, it just feels like a real authentic documentary. But at a point, this movie really goes for it, gets really gross, lots of body horror, and just creepy, gooey, gross, uncomfortable things. And in some cases, found footage movies kind of drag. But this never drags because it always has this sense of mystery, this air of mystery of you trying to figure out what's going on, what actually happened, and it just quickly becomes chaos and just stuff's happening all over the place, and so it is constantly keeping your attention. This movie is a real banger and definitely worth adding to your list. The Tunnel is a 2011 Australian found footage horror movie, directed by Carlo Ledesma in his feature directorial debut. It stars Belle Delilah, Andy Rodorita, and Steve Davis. An investigation into a government cover-up leads to a network of abandoned train tunnels deep beneath the heart of Sydney.
The plan from the start was, when we got to the tunnels, was to get to the lake. because that's where the story was.
So last week, I was going down a lot of YouTube rabbit holes and watching a lot of videos about spelunking and people that are cave diving, just all these different YouTubers out there making video content of them exploring in these creepy abandoned places. And honestly, it's some of the scariest stuff I've seen in a while, because movies don't really get me anymore, but something like that definitely does. And I feel like this movie, as well as anything out there, captures that feeling of this creepy, you're not quite sure what you're gonna come across feeling. And this movie is very dark. It's hard to see for a lot of it, which works in its favor because it gets very eerie from that. However, if you don't have the best screen, you're gonna struggle to see this. So I recommend adjusting the lighting on whatever device you're watching this on before you get into it, and definitely, turn off the lights. Don't watch this with all these lights on and stuff in the middle of the day, because I promise you, you're gonna miss some stuff. The pacing of this though, the way it unfolds, the little bits and pieces of things you glimpse and see as you slowly go down this rabbit hole with these characters, I think really make this movie so good. It's another one that with the lights out, I can definitely see this movie getting to you. Just in general, it's a creepy good time and absolutely worth checking out.
No! You gotta get the film back home now! Think of the film!
Cannibal Holocaust is a 1980 Italian found footage horror movie. Directed by Ruggero Deodato, it stars Robert Kerman, Perry Precanon, and Francesca Ciardi. During a rescue mission into the Amazon rainforest, a professor stumbles across lost film shot by a missing documentary crew, whose goal was to study the region's indigenous cannibalistic tribes.
4 Americans plunge into the savagery of the Amazon jungle to film a documentary. They never come back. Are they still alive?
So I'm going to be totally honest about this. I am not a fan of this movie. It's not that I don't respect it, because I really do. I just think it's a little bit boring, and a lot of it is it's been overhyped. I didn't see it when I was a kid. By the time I saw it, I was a young adult, and I heard all these crazy things about it. And when I finally saw it, I was like, all right, kind of depressing. And that's the other thing. I'm not a huge fan of depressing, kind of movies that are just kind of a bummer. And this feels like that. It's not exactly scary to me, but it is kind of gross, but mostly it just feels like a downer. But I absolutely respect it. For one, in a lot of ways, this is the first found footage horror movie, and really a pioneer and way ahead of its time. For two, the creative ways that it was shot, the way the special effects were done, all the different things that went into making this is very impressive, especially on the budget and working where they were doing this in general. But there are things I really don't like about it. For one, the animal death. There's never a reason to kill a poor animal just for the sake of making a movie. And so I don't really need to see that over and over. This is not a rewatchable kind of movie. And then, like I also said, it feels pretty much like a bummer. This is not a movie that you have fun with. It's not a movie you come out all, wow, what was that? It's more of just this glum, dour feeling. And like I said, I also think it's very overhyped, because a lot of the reason this movie's talked about and held up to the way that it is because for a long time, people believed this was real stuff, to the point where the director and people involved had to go to a court case and prove that this stuff was not real, that this was not a snuff movie. And we see the same thing still happen today. We see things get viral and blown up, and people talk about hype all the time. I mean, there's a number of movies this year that a lot of people don't think were as good as they expected because they went into it with all this hype. So am I a fan of this movie? Nah. But do I respect it? Absolutely. And when you talk about some of the best found footage horror movies, this has definitely got to be in the conversation.
Guys, come on!
I like you.
VHS is a 2012 anthology found footage horror movie with segments created by Adam Wingard, David Bruckner, Ty West, Glenn McQuaid, Joe Swanberg, Matt Bettinelli-Olpin, and Tyler Gillette. A group of misfits are hired to break into a desolate house and steal a rare VHS tape, but they discover more found footage than they bargained for.
Which one is it?
I don't know, man. Let's just look at these, okay?
so special about this tape anyway?
So this is on me. There is no way this should have been left off my first list. Sometimes when you're putting these together, things slip through the cracks, and I'm not even sure how I missed this one because it's one of my absolute favorite found footage movies for sure. I've always been a big fan of anthologies as well, but on top of that, all the different filmmakers that were involved in this project in particular, it's really mind-blowing how many of them have gone on to becoming these huge, massive stars in the filmmaking world. I mean, you have Matt Bettinelli Olpin and Tyler Gillette doing Abigail this year, as well as the last couple Scream movies and Ready or Not. You have Adam Wingard, who did Your Next, as well as the last Godzilla Kong movie. And then Ty West with the X trilogy, as well as other movies. And I can't forget David Bruckner, who's one of my favorite filmmakers in general right now with The Ritual and The Night House. I mean, these are just honestly some of the best filmmakers, period, right now. This is just such a fun, creative anthology movie. Each one of the different segments in it takes a totally different direction and feel to it, and it really kind of set the groundwork for what has become this awesome yearly thing with the VHS movies. I mean, this year we got VHS Beyond, which kind of mixed in some sci-fi elements, and I thought was a lot of fun too. But this movie started it all, and this really kind of set up this situation where a lot of these young filmmakers could get a start by making one of these different segments with every year a different VHS movie, and they really get an opportunity to show what they can do. And each one of the VHS movies, some segments are better than others, but I think this original first one, they're all great in their own creepy, disturbing way. And I just think it's a perfect pick for this Saturday night. So do yourself a favor this weekend, pick one of the movies off of this list, grab your popcorn and your candy, and enjoy! And I want to give a huge, massive, enormous thank you to the Ghost Pirate crew, to you guys over on Patreon, and to the channel members over here. You guys mean so much to me. And if you would like to help support this channel over on Patreon, there's a link down in the description. Or you can become a channel member by clicking on that join button down there and help the channel out that way. But like always, thank you so much for watching. Please crush that like button. And remember, guys, horror can be fun. And if you enjoyed this, click right here to watch me talk about 10 horror movies over on Prime Video that I think you'll enjoy. And I'll see you guys next time.